kicked all of the ass, didn't it? Huge success critically, commercially. Everybody seems to love this movie and be very happy with it. However, one thing that has happened is that this now completes the Spider-Man trilogy with the MCU, and these movies tend to go in threes. Of course, things like Thor are going to be the rare exception, but mostly the films have kind of a trilogy feel to them. Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And Tom Holland himself, in a recent interview with both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield, has kind of said, if not outright confirmed, that yeah, he feels like this was kind of his last outing as Spider-Man, and he felt like he left it in a good place. So the question now becomes, is what does that mean for Spider-Man movies going forward? I think we should specify before we move on that just because this may have been Tom Holland's last Spider-Man movie, I do not believe for a second it is his last outing as Spider-Man. With the MCU and the way that it's structured, we're bound to see him back again in one of the team-up movies or doing a cameo in something. I mean, think of it this way. Iron Man 3 was the last Iron Man movie, but Robert Downey Jr. appeared in 4 more movies after that: Civil War, Homecoming, and the 2 subsequent Avengers films. So, I don't believe that Tom Holland is done as Spider-Man yet, but I do believe that this could be the last of his solo outing Spider-Man movies. So once again, the question that this brings up is, what does this mean for the Spider-Man franchise going forward? It's too big of a franchise and too big of a name to just leave hanging. Sony is not going to let that happen. And I seriously doubt if Marvel is going to let that happen, especially considering that this film made, all the money. So we're faced with the possibility again of that thing that can be a breath of fresh air to a franchise or could be its downfall. We are faced again with the possibility of another reboot. And the more I think about that, the less excited I get. My concern is that Spider-Man, Peter Parker specifically, is going to become the next Batman. In that, when we first got news of a new Batman film, Batman Begins, everybody was very excited. A fresh take. We're going to do it differently, a different director, and we were very thrilled, and deservedly so. We got 2 really great movies out of that franchise. But here we are several years later, and we have yet another new Batman coming out. And it feels like the bloom is very much off the rose. Nobody is really super excited about this one in the way that they were in the past, because since 1989, we've had 7 big screen Batmans, all of which telling the same story, just telling it differently, with very little breadth or space in between them to let us miss Batman in order for there to be a fresh take on Batman. And I think that's something that has been the plague of the Batman series. It's been a real problem for the Spider-Man series as well. Not a lot of time has passed in between the various incarnations of Spider-Man, and I think that's become a problem. So the question I'm posing here is, what do you do with the Spider-Man franchise going forward? And I think the main thing that you do is you cannot go back and reboot and do another version of Peter Parker. You just can't. It's been done. It's been done 3 times. And I believe that the people at Sony and Marvel more than Sony, are smart enough to realize this, because they have begun planting the seeds for other incarnations of Spider-Man to come in and take up the reins so they can take this franchise in a new direction and look at it through fresh eyes. So what I want to do here is just talk about my ideas and what I think we should do with the Spider-Man franchise going forward. So there's a couple of things I want to note before we get started. So number one, obviously this is all guesswork, fan fiction, whatever you want to call it. I clearly have no direct line to anybody involved with any decision-making process at either studio. And I'm sure that the last person they're going to tell about any of this or give any inside information to is the lowest rated YouTuber out there. I doubt very heavily that's going to be the case. So this is all fun guesswork, theories, things that I would like to see. The second thing I want to stress is that if any of these projects are to happen, then they have to happen under the Marvel-Sony partnership umbrella for two reasons. Lesser of them is that means that these characters can be involved directly with the MCU. Now, that's not a necessary thing. After all, both Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield's Spider-Mans are only now, loosely connected to the MCU, but in terms of continuity and everything, they are their own product. It's nice that they can cross over and be a part of that continuity as well, but it's not a necessity. The more pressing matter, as far as I'm concerned, is that I think Sony needs the Disney babysitter. I'm sorry, but Sony, you cannot be trusted with Spider-Man on your own. It kills me to say that, considering that they produced the two flag bearers and standards for which all Spider-Man movies are based, Spider-Man 1 and 2. But ever since their direct interference with Spider-Man 3, which nobody ever brings up whenever they bitch and moan about that movie, they never bring up that it was because the studio demanded they put Venom in it, and Sam Raimi had no interest in that. That's why that movie was a tonal nightmare and nowhere near up to the standards of the other two. And ever since then, they have been pissing the bed. Sorry, folks, you may love Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man now, but the Amazing Spider-Man movies still sucked. Sorry, not sorry. Those god-awful Venom movies. The equally shitty-looking Morbius film, and the fact that they're going to do that with Calvin the Hunter as well, or Kraven the Hunter, I'm sorry. Sony cannot be trusted. And as such, I feel that these have to happen with the Disney babysitter in order to get any kind of quality. Now, some people would say, well, what about Into the Spider-Verse? Yes, okay, I'll grant you that one. They did a great job with Into the Spider-Verse. But their record is not in their favor. So Disney would have to babysit. This has to be done with the Disney partnership. Lastly, and again, this is kind of going back to my original thesis statement, that these cannot be about Peter Parker, but it doesn't mean Peter Parker can't be involved. We now have 3 Peter Parkers swinging around in various universes, and any one of these movie ideas that I'm about to talk about can take place in one of their universes or in a completely separate universe that can then allow any one of those Spider-Men to swing in, do a guest spot, and then swing back out. So, that's the groundwork. So let's talk about what I think I would like to see in future Spider-Man movies. We're going to start with the most obvious, and we're going to move down the row to some of the ones you might not have thought of. So let's talk about it. So here are the things I would like to see happen with the next cinematic incarnation of Spider-Man. Here we go. Number 1. Miles Morales. So as I said, we're not. These are listed in the order from most obvious to least obvious, and I think this one is clearly a no-brainer. First of all, the MCU has teased Miles' involvement twice already. Secondly, Miles is an established character with a dedicated fan base who has proven himself a worthy inheritor of the Spider-Man mantle. And his appearance in both Into the Spiderverse and as well as the follow-up to the highly successful PlayStation game has boosted him into mainstream consciousness. One of the things I was worried about in terms of when they were talking about possibly doing a Miles Morales movie early on is that, you know, he wasn't as well known by the average fan, and therefore I was worried he wouldn't be accepted. But now that Into the Spider-Verse has happened and he's a common name, I think it is about time Miles pops up in live action. The only downside to that is that, much like the hurdle that the Andrew Garfield films had, is that Miles' origin has already been done really, really, really well in Into the Spider-Verse. So doing it again is going to be very, very tricky, and you got to be very careful because you're going to be drawing comparisons to that movie. But I think with a good writer and a director who really wants to tell the story, I think it can be done and be done very, very well. This would be a great thing. I know he's busy and has his hands full with the Black Panther sequel, but it'd be great to see Ryan Coogler step in and maybe take this one. Or Michael B. Jordan is about to have his directorial debut with Creed 3, supposedly. Wouldn't that be cool to have Michael B. Jordan direct a Spider-Man movie? I would love to see that. And plus, it would give a young black actor a platform to become a mainstream superhero and star. I think it's a great idea. I would be really, really excited to see Miles Morales in live action. Number 2. SpiderGwen. This is another one that I feel is a no-brainer, and of all of these projects, I think this is the one I want to see the most. I've said it before, I'll say it again, I love SpiderGwen. Ghost Spider, Spider-Woman, Spider-Girl, whatever name she goes by, she has been a phenomenal character and has done the impossible in that she made Gwen Stacy interesting. Stan Lee himself always said the most important thing that Gwen Stacy ever did was die, and now that is no longer the truth. Once again, thanks to Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Gwen has a mainstream following. She's known to people, and I think she's a very, very fresh take on Spider-Man mythos, especially if you take her origin story where, you know, not only is she bitten by the spider, but her version of Peter Parker becomes the Lizard. I think there's just a lot of fun you can have, and you can set up an entirely new universe with her and an entirely new continuity, which is very freeing. Everybody loves the MCU, but eventually you're going to run into the same problem you have with the comics, in that the weight of all the years of continuity is going to start to bear down on you. Here, you can start fresh, new take, new characters, and really have some fun with it. I had done a few years ago my picks for possible casts for some of these characters, and I feel like I need to amend this one a little bit. Times have changed since when I first did that video, and I feel like I would like to put Peyton List up as a potential star of a Spider-Gwen movie. So Peyton List of Cobra Kai fame would be my choice. She's proven that she has a wide range, going from, the Disney sitcoms like Jessie and into her badass role on Cobra Kai. So she's got the range, she's got the athleticism, she's viable as both a sweet girl and a bad girl, and she's believable in action scenes. So I think Peyton List would be a phenomenal choice to play Spider-Gwen. Number 3, Silk. So Silk is a relatively new addition to the Spider-Man mythos. She was introduced a few years ago, around the same time as Spider-Gwen, actually. So in the regular Marvel universe, Sydney Moon is a Korean-American student who was on the field trip that Peter Parker was on when he got bitten by the radioactive spider, and as it turns out, she got bitten as well. And before her powers could manifest, she was hidden away from the world by a man named Ezekiel, trying to keep her safe from a group of interdimensional vampires that were chasing down spider people. This kind of became the catalyst for the comic book version of Into the Spiderverse. Keep that in mind for later. So, in the comics, Sydney gets out, and her main driving goal is trying to rediscover what happened to her family after she's been locked up for however many years. I think that this is the perfect way to bring Tom Holland's Spider-Man back in, putting him in a movie starring Silk, wherein he is now the experienced Spider-Man, and he is now charged with bringing Sydney up to speed, everything that went on. If she's been locked up for any stretch of time, she probably missed the blip and doesn't know about all of that. It also offers some pretty neat things in terms of the character. One of the fun things about Sydney Moon as Silk is that she's almost the opposite of Peter Parker, in that she gets out of the cell and her life is not easy, but it's nowhere near as difficult as his seems to be. One of the things being like J. Jonah Jameson actually really likes her as a person and likes Silk. So that'd be a neat thing to bring J.K. Simmons back in if he'd be willing to do so. One of the other fun things is that because Sydney and Peter were bitten by the same spider, there is this hormonal primal attraction that they have to each other, that when they get too close, their hormones take over and they just start making out. So that would be a kind of an interesting thing to play with. More than that, Sydney is just a really warm and fun character, a fish out of water, trying to put her life back together after being out of it for so long. And I think that'd be a neat place to take the Spider-Man series and a new Spider-Person in the MCU proper. It also affords us something we have not seen before, a chance for a female Korean-American actor to be a superhero in a big blockbuster franchise. So I think that one definitely needs to happen. Number 4, Spider-Woman, Jessica Drew. So Jessica Drew is one of those characters that has been in the Marvel Comics forever. And she's been bounced around it so many times. Her origin has been redone. Her powers have been messed with. She's been an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. Her comic has been an espionage series. It's been a supernatural series where she fought werewolves and vampires. Sometimes she gets her powers by science. Sometimes she gets them by magic. It's all over the place. And I think that if any character is in desperate need of a MCU consolidating and simplifying of decades of backstory, it is her. And that is something the MCU has proven itself time and time again to be very, very good at. Taking these convoluted, long-running series with characters whose backstories and powers have been messed with so often to fit whatever mold they needed to get into, and streamlining them down to a more accessible format. You know, we saw it with Guardians of the Galaxy, we saw it with the Eternals, and I think Jessica could really do with one of these. Right now, if the last time I checked in, she was much more into the espionage side of things, so this could be a character you could drop into any number of espionage-themed series, like the new Captain America and the Winter Soldier. If they do a Black Widow sequel, she could be in that. You know, the Spider-Woman thing would kind of blend in with that, so that would work. If they go into another Hawkeye series or any kind of series that comes out of that, like Echo, she would be a good one to kind of drop in there. I kind of think that Jessica would be better suited to a Disney Plus series than a film series, but I think that could work. Another bonus with Jessica is that she has, in the comics, served as a mentor to several different incarnations of Spider-Girl, including one, I think she's still the active Spider-Girl, Anya Cortez, I think is her name, a Latina Spider-Girl. So that would be a nice way to bring her into the franchise as a sidekick or trainee to Jessica, much in the same way they just did Kate Bishop with Hawkeye. Number 5. An Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire crossover. So, as I've said, one of the interesting things to come out of the success of No Way Home is this bizarre renewed interest in the Andrew Garfield version of Spider-Man, because for the first time we actually got to see what he could do as Spider-Man if he had people who cared backing him up. And there has been this movement online to bring back the Amazing Spider-Man film series and have him do a Spider-Man 3. I am firmly against this for various reasons. Number one, as I said, the Amazing Spider-Man film sucked. And just because this version of Spider-Man was finally good in one movie, it doesn't retroactively redeem the past ones. I also think that Andrew Garfield is good kind of where he is. He doesn't seem like he's hurting because he didn't get to do a Spider-Man 3. It seems like his career is taken off and he's in a good place. And I think he, just from the vibe I get from him, is that he's having more fun kind of coming in and doing these cameos than he would be taking on the full responsibility of carrying a movie again. So with that in mind, and I said this during my review, and I said it during my top 10 list of the year, the only way I would be interested in seeing another Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie is if it was an Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire team-up vehicle, because the two of them worked so well together. Their chemistry in No Way Home was amazing. No pun intended. And I would love to see these guys team up again and just do a whole movie of the two of them just swinging around, solving groovy mysteries. Now, you could go two ways about this. You could make this, since there'd have to be two separate Spider-Men teaming up again, you could make this a foreshadow for something bigger. Perhaps they're trying to fix up the multiverse. This could introduce us to Madam Web and the Web of Life, which is a big thing in the Spider-Man comics. This could introduce us to the blood-sucking karma vampires I was mentioning earlier that plagued Silk. So this could be a very dramatic, interesting way to bring these two characters back. Or what I would more like to see is just a buddy cop film. I want to see more of a Rush Hour type thing with these two, where they're just swinging around having fun. I don't want a lot of seriousness. I don't want a lot of heavy shit, weighing it down. This would be a great time to, bring Kirsten Dunst back, maybe even, what's her name, who played Gwen in the Amazing Spider-Man? Emma Stone, sorry. If she wants to come back, maybe they could do that. I think there's a lot of fun you can have with it. I just want to see these two guys play around and have fun being Spider-Man again. So, again, that's just me. Number 6. Spider-Man, Renew Your Vows. So, in the comics, Spider-Man and Mary Jane have had a very, very rocky relationship. But in one alternate timeline, they were allowed to get married and stay married, and even had a kid by the name of Annie, who, of course, inherited her father's spider powers and became the hero Spiderling, and several other aliases, none of which she really liked, which is kind of a running joke of the series, that her dad keeps giving her new identities, all of which she hates. Now, there's a number of ways you can play this, but if I'm going to be honest, I think the way I would most like to see this one played is this would be a really interesting way to see Tom Holland and Zendaya return as their versions of Spider-Man and Mary Jane and introduce their daughter as Annie. Especially since the way their relationship ended in the movie is very reminiscent, if not the exact same way as the marriage was dissolved in the Spider-Man comics. So this would be an interesting parallel universe for these two characters whom we've always known to come back and play the same characters but different in a different situation, and also bring in their kid, which could only be entertaining. Interestingly enough, another part of the Renew Your Vows story, which is unique, is that in this continuity, thanks to comic booky, science-y mumbo-jumbo, Peter Parker invents a device that allows Mary Jane to borrow his powers. So all 3 of the Parkers are spider-themed heroes. So wouldn't that be just kick-ass to see Zendaya as a Spider-Girl or Spider-Woman or Spinneret, as she was called, which I think is a terrible name. But wouldn't that just be awesome? I would love to see that. Number 7. Spider-Girl, Mayday Parker. Okay, so this one takes a little bit of explaining, so settle in with me. So back in the late 90s, there was a Spider-Man story which has become infamous, known as the Clone Saga. Now, I am not going to go into everything that went on in that because it's too long, it's too messy, and better internet personalities than I have done a much better job of streamlining everything that went on there. For the purposes of our conversation, what is important is that as part of that clusterfuck, one of the major story elements is that as things were going on, Mary Jane gets pregnant, and Peter decides he's going to retire as Spider-Man and pass the mantle on to his clone, Ben Reilly, so that he can go off and be Spider-Dad. At the combination of this story arc, Mary Jane loses the baby, or perhaps the baby is kidnapped by Norman Osborn. It's very unclear. Nobody really knows, and it's never been mentioned again in the comics proper, as far as I can remember. However, around that same time, the so-so in popularity Marvel comic What If, the thing that the animated series on Disney Plus has been based on, in its 105th issue, ran a story, what if Peter and Mary Jane's baby had survived? And what happened is she grew up, became Mayday Parker, Spider-Girl. This one-off issue proved so popular that Mayday spun off into her own monthly series that lasted several years and was, quite frankly, awesome. It was a really, really good book. They recently just re-released it in trade paperback form, and I've been going back and rereading it, and it's a really, really good story. There for a while, Mayday was the best thing in the Spider-Man universe because the original title was going down the drain, and she had a breath of fresh air, a fresh take on the Spider-Man mythos. Here you had a character who was dealing with being a legacy, cutting out her own path as a spider person and as a superhero, dealing with both of her parents who were not thrilled with her taking up the mantle for various reasons. She got to fight standard Spider-Man villains that have returned, like the Hobgoblin, the Kingpin, one of the villains from the Clone Saga by the name of Kane. She also got her own rogues gallery with characters like Crazy 8, Funny Face, Mr. Nobody, Raptor. And she established her own band of foes, friends, supporting characters, and a lot of characters that spun off from her. The Spider-Girl comics of the late 90s were truly amazing. And I keep using that term, but it's true. And I would love to see Mayday Parker on the big screen and see her continuity on the big screen. Whereas with Renew Your Vows, I said I would want to see Tom Holland and Zendaya. Well, here, I want to see Tobey Maguire and Kirsten Dunst back as an older Peter and Mary Jane. You could fit it into their continuity. It would be perfect. It would work flawlessly. And yeah, if you have any doubts, I can't spout the praises of this book enough. Go pick up the trade paperbacks and read them and see how good of a character Mayday is. And she's kind of fallen into obscurity in recent years, and I think it's time she comes back and gets the fan approval that she deserves alongside characters like Miles and Gwen. So I really want to see Mayday Parker on the big screen. Very, very much. Number 8. Spider-Verse live action. So this is one I literally came up with, and it should have been a no-brainer, but it came into my head as I was driving out to talk about these, is that if we could do all of this, as all of this happened exactly as I've described it, exactly as I've always imagined it, and we got all these different film series, all these different spider people, well, there's only one thing missing. And that is, we need a big blow-off. We need an Avengers Endgame level blow-off to all of this, where all of the spider people come back and have one big punch-up. I mentioned in several of these, in terms of the story, in the comics, the catalyst for the Spider-Verse crossover were the totem vampires going around and going to different timelines and universes and killing spider people because for some reason they liked to eat spider people. I don't know. Comic books. And this is what caused all these different spider people from all of these different continuities to team up. This would be perfect. This would be a must-do, in my opinion. You would, if we did all this, if you could do all this and get all of these different franchises going, then the only logical thing is there would have to be a big team up where you got all of the spider people together, maybe threw in some others that had cameos like Spider-Man Noir, like Spider-Ham, Spider-Man UK, you know, characters that I think are good but I don't think could really maintain a series. Spider-Man Noir maybe, but anyway, and really let them all work off each other, bounce off each other, play off each other, just like what we got in No Way Home, only on a much larger scale with tons of characters. That would just be awesome. I don't think it'll happen, but I certainly would love to see it. So, that's my list. And of course, I've left off other ones. I think Spider-Man Noir would make a good one-off, or maybe a Disney Plus series. I think Spider-Man 2099 would be an interesting series or film as well. But these are the ones that I would be the most excited about, and the ones that I want to see more than anything. So, will they happen? Some of them I believe so. I think we're going to get a Miles Morales and a Spider-Gwen. Others, I don't know. But I would really, really like to see all of them fully realized and brought to life with the same magic that Marvel has been able to do with a lot of their other characters. Sorry for the glare. So, there it is. That's my selection. That's what I think I would like to see happen to the Spider-Man series now that Tom Holland is hanging up the webs. So do you agree? Do you disagree? Are there Spider people or takes on the property you would like to see happen? Let me know, or make your own video. Let's hear it. There are never enough good ideas. So that's all for me. Thank you for listening. Thanks for coming along. And as always, drive safe, and I will see you at the movies.